The old adage says that fantasy leagues can't be won at your draft. Well, the truth is, fantasy leagues get won right here, right now. Fine tuning your rosters, ensuring you are nailing those start sit decisions can help you push towards those playoffs, and it is essential at this time of year. We're going to walk you through every single matchup on this week's slate, answering 100% of your questions along the way. We're going to start with the highest over under, Tom, on the slate. Of course, it is Dallas at the Atlanta Falcons, a massive 52 over under. How do you want to attack this one to begin with?
Well, I think that it's going to be a really interesting matchup, particularly for how the Falcons try to attack the Cowboys, because we know that Dallas has been weak against the run. They allow the second most running back fantasy points. They're like bottom 3 in defensive DVOA against the run, but they're also not particularly good against the pass this year. And Trayvon Diggs is battling a calf injury. Jerry Jones said that he might be able to play, but he might also not be able to play. I feel like when Jerry Jones is like trying to be optimistic about something, most of the time we know where that ends up. So I would expect that we see a decent amount of the Falcons passing game. The Falcons have really kind of kicked into gear over the last few weeks. You know, Bijan Robinson's had over 22 points in 3 straight games. Kyle Pitts has had over 65 yards in 4 straight games. Yes, Drake London was held below 12 points in week 8 for the first time, but his usage was really positive. It was just a kind of a case of things just didn't quite break right for him. And if Trayvon Diggs is out this week, then I'd feel quite confident about the Falcons. In terms of the Cowboys, it would be very good for him to have Rico Dowdle back. They have the least explosive run rate in the league. They just, you know, if you're looking at Zeke Elliott and Dalvin Cook, of course, you're not going to get anything explosive. But they need Rico out there. He's by far the best running back that they have right now. And the Cowboys, they just need more players who can do things like CeeDee Lamb getting a 46% target share is excellent for those of us like you and me who have plenty of CeeDee Lamb, but they need a better offense around him. Jalen Tolbert putting up 40 yards every week is kind of fine. Jake Ferguson hasn't really been a factor this year. Brandon Cooks is eligible to come off IR soon, but they really need to kick into gear in the same way that they did last year. But I think that this one is a lot easier to play from the Falcons side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's basically with the state of the Cowboys defense. It looked fantastic after week 1. Mike Zimmer looked like a genius, and it's basically fallen apart since then, hasn't it? So, yeah, I think it's gear up all your Falcons ready to start this week. But Tom, is there one in particular that you're excited about starting this week?
Yeah, and it's Kyle Pitts, because over the last few weeks, we've just seen him really kind of find his stride. You know, the first few weeks, it felt like we were kind of careening towards another disappointing Kyle Pitts year. And I mean, I bet there was some really low value trades that went on with Kyle Pitts over those first couple of weeks because he didn't look good. But since then, he's finished as tight end 4, tight end 21, and tight end 13. And it's all looked quite good. You know, he's had at least 65 receiving yards in 4 straight games. Since week 5, Pitts is the PPR tight end 3, averaging 16 PPR points per game. Like, those are excellent numbers. And it feels like he could still go even higher with it. So, yeah, I'm very much in on Kyle Pitts. I think when you look at the Cowboys, they allow the 12th most fantasy points to the tight end position. They've allowed 4 tight end touchdowns in the last 3 games. Kyle Pitts, man, smash.
Yeah, absolutely love Kyle Pitts this week. He's a top 6 option for me. As you can see from start sits, for me, it's fairly straightforward. It's basically those 3 key Cowboys players that I don't think you can get away from in any matchup. I don't particularly love Rico Dowdle this week. I think he's only a flex for me. I'm just a little bit concerned. If we're going to see, it's pathetic, but if we're going to see 4 or 5 touches from Dalvin Cook, if we're going to see the 10 touches from Zeke earlier, I just worry that there's not going to be enough touches for Rico Dowdle to basically produce, even though he is the best back in this backfield. And then, of course, you're starting your core 4, although we can throw Donald Mooney as a core 5 potentially for the Falcons.
Yeah, and the Falcons have been good against the running back position for most of this year. They've allowed like the 9th fewest fantasy points to the position. Their run defense does rank 18th, but you know that's better than their pass defense. It is more of a strength for them than the pass defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've got any questions, start sits, trade questions, whatever you want to know, get them in the comments below. If you're live, we'll answer 100% of those questions whilst we are on the show. If you're watching this post-live show, you can still get them in. Tom and I will answer all of those questions leading all the way up to kickoff on Sunday. Sliding across to another one of the higher over-under on the slate. Miami bounced back in a big way with Tua back healthy last week. They head up to New York to play Buffalo. Tom, Miami traditionally struggle in the cold. Reports are this could be sub 40 degrees. Are you scared of any of these Miami skill position players?
Well, as I was kind of diving into this matchup this week, the one thing that I kept coming back to was that Miami haven't played well against Buffalo over the last couple of years. They've really struggled against them most of the time. But part of me was going, well, how much of that can you excuse because of the cold weather? They've had like years where they've had both matchups at the back end of the season. And we know Tua's not a cold weather guy. He just can't do it. We've yet to see him do it at all. And even this season, Tua just hasn't looked particularly impressive. He's been okay at times, but I think he really needs to find his stride. Last week wasn't particularly great. The only thing going well for the Dolphins at the minute is Devon Achane, who in the games with Tua starting has been above 23 PPR points in every game. His receiving role is far more impressive this year than it was last year. The Bills, they have allowed the third most running back fantasy points in total. But of course, part of that comes back to, I do like looking at the total points because I feel like it gives you a good picture of the entire season rather than just in recent weeks sometimes. But part of the problem with the Bills is that they got absolutely shellacked by Derrick Henry. And so that does skew the picture slightly. Tyreek, he's had 0 games against the Bills with more than 82 yards. In 3 of the last 5 games he's played against them, he's not scored a touchdown. Jalen Waddle, man, I need you to do something, but it's becoming harder and harder to hold out hope because it feels like the offense has kind of moved in a slightly different direction right now. But I do think the running game is going to be good. Miami is second in yards before contact at 3.76. You contrast that to Buffalo, who are last at 2.27. So that's something which Bills really need to get going a bit better. I think that James Cook's been pretty decent this year, 77% running back share over the last 4 weeks. But where Josh Allen can capitalize in this one is against the Miami defense. They're going to be missing Jevon Holland, who's their safety. He's out for this game, as well as Zach Sealer on the defensive line. But Miami have been pretty good against passes near the line of scrimmage, but they've been awful against deep passes, those balls which are going more than 15 yards. And we know that Josh Allen wants to do that. The Bills have been more pass heavy over the last couple of games since they got Amari Cooper. Keon Coleman is 5th in receiving yards over expected per Next Gen Stats. He seems to be finding his way, and he's the kind of guy who I would expect if Josh Allen's pushing the ball downfield, he would benefit from it. Amari Cooper played 34% route rate in week 1 that he was with the Bills. That was up to 67%. He is questionable for last week, but I'd be fine starting Coleman, fine starting Cooper. Khalil Shakir's had 10 plus PPR points in all but 1 game. I think all 3 of them are fine. James Cook, fine. And obviously, this feels like a spot where Josh Allen can strengthen his MVP case.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I'm looking at this game and I want to see the Bills wide receiver room shake out because it's felt like so far in the 2 weeks post Amari Cooper trade, Amari Cooper's not been a full participant. He's not been fully up to speed. So Coleman and Shakir have still kind of got theirs as such. I don't know who's going to miss out because I can't see Cooper not being 100% snap share guy. So who's going to miss out in those 2 wide receiver sets? Is it going to be Shakir? Is it going to be Coleman? For me, at the moment, they're all wide receiver 3s this week. I feel comfortable starting all of them. I don't love starting any of them. You could tell me that one of them is going to be a star, one of them is going to be a dud. It's a toss of the coin. I don't know which one's which. But outside of that, I think you've got to start your Miami studs. I really want to see Jalen Waddle do something. I've listened and spoken to a few people, and they're suggesting that because Devon Achane's getting more involved in the passing game, it's kind of taken away from Waddle. But I still feel like there's enough balls to go round that Jalen Waddle should be able to eat. It shouldn't be a case of he misses out because they've got a third complementary receiving weapon. So hopefully, I mean, Raheem Mostert obviously got the 2 goal line touchdowns last week. Tom, you got any interest in him in deeper formats or perhaps throwing into any sort of DFS contests?
Yeah, I think like in traditional leagues like my home league, which is 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 1 flex, I'd struggle to start Raheem Mostert. But in a lot of the leagues that we play in where you've got 4 or 5 flex spots, then yeah, definitely Raheem Mostert is very interesting. I think if you wanted to play Raheem Mostert in DFS, then he'll be excellent leverage away from the more chalky Devon Achane. That's always going to be the way. Tyreek Hill will probably be quite chalky, even though it's a tricky matchup for him. So most it's just always the ultimate GPP play. You just have to be comfortable with the fact that his floor is quite low as well.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. We're going to dive across now to the Vegas versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Tom, this Bengals offense feels like we're starting to fall apart a little bit. We've potentially got T. Higgins is doubtful. Zach Moss is now doubtful. Does that make you more interested because it's a more consolidated offense? Or do you think that the lack of weapons could potentially cause some issues for Joe Burrow and friends?
Well, it's just really noteworthy that the Bengals, all they've done is beat up on bad teams so far this year. They've yet to win a game against a team with a winning record, and obviously the Raiders are 2-6, so that's the perfect kind of team for the Bengals to be taking on. Joe Burrow, I think he's been excellent, but yeah, you just always left wanting a little bit more. And obviously, without T. Higgins, it changes the game plan for the Bengals dramatically. Last week, they looked fine, but you saw what Joshevich had 3 targets, didn't catch any of them. Jermaine Burton, we're out here celebrating the fact he had a season high 43% route share. Maybe one of them can grow into that role. Obviously, Mike Gesicki, his splits without T. Higgins on the field have been excellent. He's had 11 points in 3 games without Higgins versus 3.0 in those with him, seeing like 7 targets per game. Those are excellent numbers for tight ends, so I'd be fine starting him. I think without Zach Moss, obviously, that's a big hit for the Bengals in pass protection. We know they don't particularly trust Chase Brown there. So are we going to see Chase Brown finally get those pass protection snaps? Or are we going to see him continue to be moved off the field for someone like, one of the Bengals backups who nobody is rostering? Yeah, Travion Williams. Like, I don't think, maybe, but it doesn't. Zach Moss has been pretty irrelevant for the last couple of games. He hasn't played more than 51% of snaps in the last 3 weeks. He's scored single-digit fantasy points in that spell. I just kind of think the Bengals will get theirs this week. You'll see Jamar Chase have a fine week. The Raiders aren't a poor pass defense. They're pretty good on defense. It's just like they're one of these teams that gets worn out because their offense is so poor. Over time, you are going to get worn down by it. In terms of where they rank in DVOA, the Raiders are 17th. Meanwhile, the Bengals, they are 22nd. So these are 2 teams that will give up production through the air. The Bengals also allow the 7th most tight end fantasy points, the 4th most of the quarterback position. So hopefully we can see Gardner Minshew able to stay upright enough to get the ball to Brock Bowers. Hopefully Jacoby Myers kicks on after 8.7 targets per game over the last 4. It's those 2. It's Alexander Mattison, who I've been banging the drum for pretty much all season since he took the role from Zamir White. Yes, he's nothing fancy, but for me, he's an every week flex play. And coming off an 82% running back rush share in week 8 and against Bengals defense that isn't particularly strong, I'm completely fine with it.
Yeah, this Bengals defense is absolutely atrocious. Trey Hendrickson is literally the only body out there that's actually moving the needle anyway. So, yeah, I think normally I wouldn't like starting a lot of Raiders, but I think Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers absolutely smashes this week. I love Alexander Mattison as that kind of flex RB3 type range. For me, my concern, Tom, we talked about Zach Moss missing the game. I think the Bengals are going to go one of 2 ways. They're either going to go 5 out, spread the ball around, and force the Raiders to keep a lot of bodies in coverage. Or we're going to see Joe Burrow go kind of back end of last year offense under Jake Browning, where it was a lot of lower A dot work, and we're going to get the ball out. Either way, I think this is going to be a heavy Jamar Chase target game. Now, I've talked a few times so far in the past few weeks. He's below his career average in terms of targets per run by about 5%. I feel like this is the week that could redress. I wonder if we're going to see a 30-35% target share, him get force-fed the ball on those kind of quick slants, quick kind of arrow routes, whether it be, maybe even get some work out of the backfield or something like that to get him some advantageous matchups. Just get the ball in his hand and let him work, because I don't know if, given the pass protection issues, we know Orlando Brown's out as well. I worry that Crosby could be feasting on this Bengals offensive line.
Yeah, I just worry a little bit that we're going to see like a return to in the 2 games where T. Higgins was out to start the season. Jamar Chase had air yards per target of 6.3 and 4.6. Once T. Higgins came back, that number never dipped below 8.5. And then the moment that T. Higgins went out last week, it dropped down to 7.8 again. So I just always kind of worry that the moment that T. Higgins isn't there, they feel like they have to bring Jamar Chase back towards the line of scrimmage much more. And that makes it easier for defenses to defend against him because obviously you can put bodies between him and the red zone. And the Raiders, they've only allowed 2 top 12 wide receiver performances and none since week 3. So much as I do like him and much as I think he can have a good week, I don't think we see wide receiver 1 overall this week out of him.
No, absolutely. And I think, to echo your point and build off that, is that I think this is where there's some rumours that Jermaine Burton's supposedly going to start this week over Andre Yoshibas. Jermaine Burton's going to see, saw career high in snaps last week, and they're supposedly going to see more this week. He is that deep threat. He absolutely can take the top off defense, and he is talented enough to scare the Raiders defense. Without T. Higgins, can he be that deep threat that keeps the defense honest, that opens up space for Jamar Chase? Yeah, I think, look, you're starting him in every week. I think if you can build him into some DFS lineups, depending on the cost, absolutely. But yeah, I'm very intrigued to see exactly what Jamar Chase is going to do. But before we move on to the next matchup, though, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do it now. We get you set up to win your leagues every single day through the week, building up to those special games on Sunday where Tyler will be doing his start sits again. Denver at Baltimore, Tom. The best offense in the league versus the best defense in the league. Can we go that far already?
I'd say the Broncos are definitely one of the more complete defenses in the league because they're good against both the run and the pass. They rank 5th against the pass. They rank 9th against the run. So they're definitely up there. And I think they're a far more complete defense than the Ravens because obviously the Ravens are just a complete pass funnel at the minute. They rank 5th against the run, 25th against the pass. What they've been particularly susceptible to is allowing long touchdowns. They've allowed a league high 9 touchdowns from outside the red zone. Well, Denver are the only team with no touchdowns outside the red zone. They've been highly reliant on getting into the red zone, and all their touchdowns have come through there, all 8 of their passing touchdowns. That's somewhere where the Ravens have been pretty good. Their completion rate allowed in the red zone drops by about 7% once they get down there. So if the Ravens can hold them to, getting into the red zone, then they can probably hold them to more field goals. If the Broncos actually managed to connect on anything longer from outside the red zone, that's what's been a problem. I think Marlon Humphrey should be back for the Ravens, which would be a big boost for them. I don't particularly want to play Javonte Williams this week because the Ravens have been so good against the run. Only Nick Chubb has managed to go over 50 rushing yards against the Ravens so far. And Javonte Williams has been quite up and down throughout. Cortland Sutton has kind of kicked into gear a little bit lately, and I think you have to play him against this Ravens pass defense. Lucas Krull's kind of like on the horizon of fantasy relevancy, but I think that's more like a deep stash for dynasty leagues than anything you'd be wanting to do right now. Troy Franklin, probably an okay dart throw if you're playing DFS, but I'm not sure I would want to start him in any managed format because it's been so volatile. One thing I note is that the Ravens, the only defensive look where they force negative EPA is cover 3. Bo Nix is the 3rd worst EPA against cover 3, so that could be something to watch out for. But since week 4, Bo Nix is the QB4, averaging 22 fantasy points per game. He's been good. I mean, look, and against this Ravens team, everybody has the best game. So I'd be fine starting him. I'd be fine, obviously, starting plenty of Ravens, despite how good the Broncos defense is. Mark Andrews seems to have solidified his role as the tight end 1 again, season high 76 route participation, which ranks it he's been a top 10 tight end for 3 weeks in a row, 4 touchdowns in 3 games. Yes, he's not playing on 12 personnel looks, but if Lamar's going to keep looking to him in the red zone and keep marching up and down the field, then he can become kind of like Jamal Williams was for the Saints for the Lions a couple of years ago. And then, otherwise, of course, the Broncos defense is good against the run, but Derrick Henry, I mean, The guy has 11 runs of 20 plus yards. No team has more than 10 in total. The Ravens have the highest explosive run rate. So, yeah, I'm very confident in Henry kind of getting there, even if it takes a little while. But, I mean, this is probably one which might be a bit ugly, but should be quite good because for the Ravens, it's a must-win game.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's fantastic for all those Ravens options, and I really like it. I know that we've obviously got Patrick Surtain to worry about, but I don't think he's going to be shadowing Zay Flowers. I think we can start Zay Flowers with confidence. Cortland Sutton, I'm a little bit less confident than you. I think it's one of these where he's getting wide receiver 1 volume, and because this offense stinks a little bit, he's kind of putting out wide receiver 3 numbers. So let's roll with that. I guess the big question is Deontay Johnson acquisition, Tom. I've heard a few people theorize some different things. Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers have pretty much been 100% snap share guys. Do you think Deontay Johnson's going to come in and affect either of those 2 roles, or do you think he's just going to be a 11 personnel that's taking over Nelson Aguilar's role?
I think that's closer to it. I mean, like, if he's going to be into someone's role, it's more likely to be Bateman's than Zay Flowers. Like, it's hard to take Zay Flowers off the field, but Bateman's really kicked on. The team seemed really pleased with him. I think, like, of Lamar's 3 longest pass completions this year, all 3 of them have been to Rashad Bateman. That's not Deontay Johnson's game. Yes, he can get open and he can help you move the chains, but look, when Deontay Johnson was traded, the Athletics beat reporter Jeff Zrebiec immediately talked about the fact that the Ravens have been looking for help in the kick return game. Like, I mean, come on. Like, if we're going to throw that out there as somebody who's very reliable, then, I mean, it's got to have something to it. And they paid absolute pennies on the dime. Like, you're talking about what? They moved back maybe 15 spots. Carolina paid most of it, and it keeps somebody away from the rest of the AFC. So I'm not expecting great things from Deontay Johnson. I also think it's worth noting that Lamar only returned to practice today. Didn't practice with Deontay for the last 2 days. Lamar is big on trust. Like, it's very hard to see Lamar going out there and immediately making Deontay Johnson relevant. So, yeah, I wouldn't be playing him. Rashad Bateman, I mean, I'll still be starting him in a bunch of deeper leagues, but he is more likely to see coverage from Patrick Surtain.
Yeah, look, I'm probably the biggest Deontay Johnson truther there is out there. I don't think Deontay Johnson is going to be startable in normal fantasy leagues for the rest of the season. I just don't see a world in which he's going to earn the trust of Lamar and the trust of the offensive coaches. Let's not forget, Deontay Johnson's a bit of a diva. He's average at run blocking when he's engaged at best. I don't think they're going to be taking Zay Flowers or Rashad Bateman off the field for him. But before we move on, though, Tom, we got a couple of questions in the chat. Steven's asking, who is he starting in the flex this week? Tyron Tracy or Chris Olave?
I mean, this one's Olave for me quite easily. I know that game scripts could get away from the Saints in that one potentially, but no, I'm easy, Chris Olave.
Yeah, I really like Tyron Tracy this week, but it is still Olave. I think you're probably getting a little bit cute if you're diving down to Tyron Tracy that week. But if, like Stephen, you want to get your questions answered, get them in the comments below. We'll answer 100% of them as we are live. New England at Tennessee, Tom. Now, this feels like this could be disgusting because we've got potentially no Drake May, potentially no Tony Pollard on Sunday. Are we wheels up for Julius Chestnut?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I've just got to say that's a mea culpa on the over-under there. That should be 37.5 rather than 52. Yeah, we'll just manifest it to be 52. And maybe if Drake May plays, we could see 52. But going back to Julius Chestnut, I mean, like, sometimes when you get these chances and it's like, right, I need to go out and pick up this player right away, or in DFS, they are a stone cold minimum and you have to play them. Like Dalton Kincaid last week on FanDuel was 4,000, which was an absurdly low price for him. But Julius Chestnut, I just don't particularly see it, despite the fact that the Patriots give up the 4th most running back fantasy points. They're not particularly good against the run in any kind of area. So I don't know. I really struggle to want to do that.
I think that a lot, we're getting too far into the weeds here, but a lot of run defenses is what defensive coordinators want to take away. And if a team wants to take away the run, they will. If they don't, they want to allow a team to run and take away the pass, they will. There's nothing on this Tennessee passing offense that's going to scare the Patriots to be like, right, we need to keep an extra body out of the box to try and shut down this passing offense. The Patriots are going to be able to walk down that extra safety into the box and say, go for it, Mason Rudolph, see what you can do. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not getting too cute. I don't think I'll be touching Julius Chestnut, even if he's the only running back healthy for Tennessee.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, for his part, Mason Rudolph's been kind of okay over the last couple of games. He's been a top 24 QB in both of them, which, that's super flex worthy. Obviously, the only passing threat he has is Calvin Ridley, who had 10 for 143 last week, but over the last 3 weeks still hasn't looked incredible at times. So I'd be okay starting him. I think you can probably expect him to see a good bit of Christian Gonzalez, who does shadow for the Patriots at times. But I wouldn't not start Ridley. I just think you have to temper your expectations. Ramondre coming off his best game of the season, RB4 23 for 65 with 2 touchdowns and 2-point conversion, is an obvious start, particularly if Drake May does miss, because you're going to see the Patriots lean on the running game even more. But Drake May, I really hope he makes it back out there. He had 3 rush attempts for 46 on the ground before he got injured last week, was well on his way to another top 12 QB performance, only played about 30% of the snaps. But yeah, I mean, you going to take dart throws on Kayshon Boutte or Hunter Henry when Jacoby Brissett's in there? I'm not.
No, I don't particularly love either of it. And there's Ayala's in the chat saying Will Levis is starting. Last I heard, it was a game time decision, and they've split first team reps in the last couple of days. So I don't know if anything's been confirmed in the last few minutes. I've been frantically looking through Twitter trying to find anything, but I can't see anything. But yeah, I think this is basically a matchup you want to try and avoid for fantasy. Yeah, Ramondre Stevenson probably gets done. Calvin Ridley as a wide receiver 3, and outside of that, I don't want to touch anything. I'm not even starting Jacoby Brissett or Mason Rudolph or Will Levis if he's the one starting, even in Superflex leagues. I think they're both all out in my top 24 this week. Moving on to Washington at the Giants. This feels like this was the glory days of the NFC East. And now it just feels like this is a Commander's absolute beatdown on the Giants. What do you think?
Yeah, well, when these teams met in, week 2 or week 3, we saw the Giants sneak the win. It was 21-18 to them. But that was back when Daniel Jones started looking competent. He had that brief spell where he was looking pretty decent. And then over the last few games, it's kind of really tailed off. We've seen Daniel Jones he's been QB 24 or worse in 4 of the last 5 games. So I don't know if we're going to see him get back to scoring 18.3 points like he did in week 2, or was it week 3? But so much Daniel Jones' production is completely tied to Malik Neighbors. Daniel Jones has been a bit poor the last few weeks. Well, Malik Neighbors missed a couple of weeks, came back, was double teamed 1 week, and then just didn't get going the next week. So if we see Malik Neighbors have a nuclear week again, perhaps Daniel Jones has some value, but really, yeah, I mean, for me, it's Malik Neighbors, it's Tyrone Tracy, who's played 59% of snaps or more in the last 2 weeks. It's completely flipped on Devin Singletary, who wasn't particularly impressive to start the year, saw a decent amount of volume, but never really turned it into anything particularly impressive. So it's good for the team that Tyrone Tracy is being given those touches. On the other side of things, I think that you could see a Washington defense that is going to give Tracy a decent amount of pull. Like, they aren't particularly good. They're better than they were last year when they were 32nd in pass defense DVOA. Where they rank against the run this year, though, is 24th. They're actually better against the pass than they are the run this year. So start Tyrone Tracy now. He's cleared concussion protocol with confidence. And then on the Washington side, I think it's straightforward. You're obviously starting Jaden Daniels, his first in EPA in yards per attempt among rookies to start week 1 to 8 since year 2000. The only thing holding back Jaden Daniels is the fact that he doesn't score lots of passing touchdowns. They seem to be able to control the game, and their defense is playing well enough that they don't have to get into shootouts. So we're rarely seeing him hit double, 2 touchdowns in the passing game. But I do like Noah Brown. 3 for 73 and 1 last week. Zach Ertz coming off season high, 7 for 77. They're all kind of fine starts if you need to. Terry McLaurin should be fine as well. It's noteworthy that Deontay Banks for the Giants has been having a quite torrid time and will most likely match up with McLaurin.
Yeah, I think Terry McLaurin is an absolute smash this week. He's a top 12 option for me. You mentioned Zach Ertz, 11 targets last week, but he just doesn't add any value to those targets. I can't get on board with him. He's outside my top 16 in terms of tight end ranks. Maybe if you're desperate at the position, but I think there's other options you can potentially go and add off the waiver wire that could get you there. Wan'Dale Robinson, Tom, it feels like we're starting to inch away from the obscene volume that he's been seeing last few weeks. That target share started to shrink. Are you still comfortable starting him as a wide receiver 3-4 flex type, or are you starting to think the time's up, the targets are there, but the value is so low?
Yeah, we've kind of seen Darius Slayton's emergence back into the offense has pushed Wan'Dale down a bit once Malik Neighbors is back. Wan'Dale's still playing a really large amount of the slot snaps. And if you were looking for some copium, the Commanders have seen like the 8th most slot targets against them. So perhaps it's a reasonable week for him, but I'd rather not start him unless I had to.
That makes a lot of sense. So Steven's back in the chat saying, if we like Tyron Tracy, would you start him over Kareem Hunt? That's a no for me. I think I like Tracy this week, but I like him as like a top 24, like him kind of thing. I think Kareem Hunt, I've got 16 or something like that. So yeah, I'm still Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, I've got Kareem Hunt at running back 17. I've got Tyron Tracy wide receiver 23. Sorry,
Okay.
running back 23.
And then John's asking, a little bit concerned about Stafford with the potential for Puka not playing. Would you prefer Dak Prescott over him this week?
I've gone with Stafford in my rankings. I think like from hearing Sean McVay's comments today, it sounds like Puka should be at play.
Yeah, absolutely. I've literally got them back to back in my rankings, which means it's basically conflict territory. I would go Stafford over Dak, but it is incredibly close. And then the last one from Alan saying JSN or Chubb this week.
I think I'm leaning towards JSN, given the news that we've got Noah Fant as well as DK Metcalf ruled out. I do like Chubb, but I think the Chargers are a good run defense, so it's close, but I'd lean JSN.
Yeah, it's pretty much a coin flip for me, but I would agree with you that we're going to lean JSN in this matchup. If you, like John, like Stephen, like Alan, want your questions answered, get them in the comments below. We'll answer them at the end of each matchup as we walk our way through the show. New Orleans versus Carolina up next, Tom. Is it a case of Alvin Kamara is going to absolutely destroy the 30 seconds in adjusted fantasy points allowed ranked Carolina Panthers defense against running backs?
Well, it should be, and I've kind of ragged on Alvin Kamara a little bit over the last few weeks that his efficiency has been dropping off and that he hasn't looked quite as strong of a player as he did over the first few weeks. But part of that is because of center Eric McCoy's been on injured reserve, so you do expect some fall off. But what sustained Alvin Kamara is the fact that over the last 5 games, he's had 10.8 targets per game. To put that into context, no other running backs had over 5.6 targets per game in that spell, and only 2 have over 5. So, like, Kamara just finds ways to keep his fantasy points alive. And obviously, here I'm not expecting the Saints to need to check down to Kamara that much. But Jamal Williams, I think, is doubtful. Kendre Miller's already been ruled out. So, unless this is a Taysom Hill week, which it definitely could be, then Alvin Kamara, could absolutely smash in this one. Chris Olave, you should have plenty of confidence coming off 36% target share in week 8 for 107 and 1. Carolina, they allow 5th most quarterback points, most running back points, most tight end points. So you can start pretty much anyone that you want to here. On the other side of this game, look, it's got to be Chuba Hubbard week. We're seeing Jonathan Brooks probably isn't going to play. It feels like Carolina probably aren't going to play him much at all this season if they do. And this is a game where Chuba's facing the biggest run funnel in the league. The Saints were ranked 32nd against the run. They aren't going to have Marshawn Lattimore, so perhaps the passing game can get going a bit more. But are you going to trust Bryce Young passing to Xavier Legette? Or are you going to trust Chuba Hubbard, who's been pretty damn decent for most of the season? So, yeah, very much in on Chuba Hubbard. I think you can even start talking about making him a captain on any DFS formats that allow that. So, yeah, very confident in Chuba.
Yeah, big fan of Chuba this week. I also think it's worth mentioning Jalen Coker's got to be in with a shout. Xavier Legette looks like he's banged up. Jalen Coker obscene rookie numbers in terms of model score, things like that. Obviously, lower level competition, but really liked him as a prospect, and I'm very intrigued in him this week. On the Bryce Young point, though, we've got Rory in the chat asking, any confidence in Bryce Young going forwards?
Yeah, I mean, like, he looked pretty good last week against a tough Denver defense. And he had his season high 73.5% catchable pass rate. Obviously, there was some garbage time involved, but any time that Bryce Young throws for 2 touchdowns feels worth celebrating after the misery we've seen over the last few months. And particularly as Adam Thielen and Deontay Johnson weren't out there. So, like, I think there's reason for hope. I think there's more to be gained for Carolina by playing Bryce Young now and seeing what he can do for the rest of the season, and particularly against this Saints defense. I mean, look, if you get a chance to get rid of Bryce Young, either if you're the Panthers or in Dynasty, it's probably worth taking it because I'm not sure there's a way back, but yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I was always taught happiness is a result of expectations. Hope for Bryce Young is a result of expectations. What are you expecting? If you're expecting him to bounce back and pay off the 101 overall pick in your rookie drafts or whatever, no, that's gone. Do I think he could be a high-end backup bridge quarterback in the NFL? Yeah, I think there's potential for that, but let's not get too excited about it moving forward. He's been pretty awful whenever he's been given the chance. On the Jonathan Brooks point, Tom, I read a really interesting article this morning that was suggesting he has to be made active by Tuesday next week. The chances are that the Panthers, I believe, are playing in Germany next week.
Yeah.
So are they going to want his debut to be in Germany, a different game, having traveled, all that kind of stuff? They are then on bye week 11. So it could well be it's week 12 before we see Jonathan Brooks active.
And I think like it'll be the sensible thing for them to make him active, but then sit him through that game because, of course, he is recovering from the ACL injury. And even though he's been practicing in full, you know, those long flights, you can get kind of swelling and stuff like that. But if they don't make him active, that ends his season, but it also ends his ability to practice. What we could see is that they make him active, add him to the 53-man roster, but then just keep him inactive on game days, you know, make him a healthy scratch, let him practice and get those reps, which he didn't get over the summer because he was still recovering. So that would be an entirely sensible decision. It would be very disappointing for those of us who drafted him, but I would get it.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. And let's be honest, look, the Panthers don't care about what happens the next few weeks. They're building for 2026 and beyond. So there's no point rushing him back. They need to view him as a long-term asset and go through there. I'm going to move across to the Chargers versus the Cleveland Browns. Now, these are two pass offenses that have become a lot more pass heavy over the recent weeks than they have been historically. Does that pique any more interest in this matchup for fantasy?
Yeah, I think it's quite clear that Justin Herbert was dealing with that foot injury through the early stages of the season, and that very much influenced how run heavy the Chargers were. I mean, like they were a bottom 2 team in pass rate over expectation over those first couple of weeks. Well, since the bye week, that extra week where Justin Herbert managed to get a bit healthier, they're second in pass rate over expectation. So I think that we're looking at possibly more of what this offense can be moving forward. Of course, their wide receivers are pretty miserable for the most part, but Herbert's coming off a season high 24 fantasy points, the first time he's been over 15 this year. He's spreading the ball around well. Will Dissly had tight shares of 29% and 23% over the last 2. Dissly almost caught what would have been a long reception, which he could have taken for a good amount of yak. And I think if that had happened, then you start talking about Will Dissly as people being really excited to play him. As it is, nobody's talking about Dissly. I mentioned him in one of my DFS columns this week, but hey. J.K. Dobbins coming off a season high, 23% target share. I was wondering if we'd see this at any point because, you know, we knew Justin Herbert leaned on Austin Eckler like that. Can we see J.K. Dobbins make up for some of his inefficiency on the ground in recent weeks with pass catching? It would make him an easier start. But yeah, I mean, this one feels pretty straightforward because the Cleveland defense isn't particularly good this year. They allow the 5th most wide receiver fantasy points. They are good at bringing pressure, which is going to force Justin Herbert to get the ball out fairly quickly. But the Chargers have a pretty good offensive line. On the other side, James said ninth most air yards in any game in week 8 against the Ravens, but we know the Ravens make everybody look good. So can he do it against a better Chargers defense? Cedric Tillman, 15 for 180 and 2 over the last 2 games. But again, the Chargers, they allow the third fewest wide receiver fantasy points. So it's by no means a good matchup for him. And then in terms of Nick Chubb, can we see him have a good game? It would be nice. But again, the Chargers will have a second fewest running back fantasy points. So I'm not necessarily plugging him back in. I think you can start Njoku. I think you can start Tillman if you need to. And you can start Jameis. But I wouldn't be rushing to the likes of Jerry Jeudy or Elijah Moore.
Yeah, I think you're getting too deep if you're going into those. I don't want any part of Jerry Jeudy right now. I think he's playing pretty awful football. I think that's why we've seen Cedric Tillman emerge. I love David Njoku this week. I think he's a top 4 option. For Nick Chubb, he's looked so much better than I ever imagined he could. It just feels like he needs to break one. All I want to see from him this week is a 20-yard rush. Can we get him running downfield? That would be amazing. Jameis I like, but can't get over to in unless it's super flex. J.K. Dobbins, we saw incredible efficiency to start the year. We've seen huge volume in the last few weeks. Do we see the efficiency start to address and maybe him have a good couple of weeks here?
Maybe. I think it's kind of one of those things where we're going to see J.K. Dobbins be good against bad defenses. Like you go back to the start of the year and it was against the Raiders and the Panthers. So we're going to get those kind of games where he can beat up on bad to average teams. And against the really good run defenses, it's going to be a bit of a coin flip. He had a miserable time against the Chiefs and the Steelers, but then had a good game against the Broncos. So J.K. Dobbins is just kind of going to be RB24 territory for most weeks, unless he's in a really good matchup, maybe RB18, depending on what else is going on that week. I think he's fine, but I'm not necessarily super excited to start him. It's just been interesting to know that Kamani Vidal hasn't taken a big role despite that, impressive touchdown on his very first touch.
Yeah, absolutely. We got some questions. Mikey's asking, would you trade Tyreek for Neighbors and Coleman? I'm presuming, first of all, this is redraft, Mikey. If this is Dynasty, feel free to dive in and let us know again. In redraft, Tom?
Well, in redraft, I would want Neighbors and Coleman, so I wouldn't want to, if this is you're getting Neighbors and Coleman, I'd be fine with that. I'm not sure I want Tyreek just because I'm not sure that the Miami offense is going to be as fruitful as we'd like it to be.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'd prefer Neighbors heads up over Tyreek. So
that's where
if you're getting a free Coleman, I'd do that 100 times out of 100. So yeah, in fact, if this is redraft or dynasty, I'd rather Neighbors straight up over Tyreek. So that's a nice trade for you, Mikey, presuming you're getting the Neighbors side. Evans in the comments, he's asking half PPR, Wandale or Alexander Mattison. That's Mattison for me.
Yeah, quite substantially Mattison for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Danny, he's asking, where do we have Bo Nix ranked this week? He's seen him pretty much all over the place.
So I've got him as my QB12, and I think that's kind of fair with Ravens being so piss poor, with Nix adding the rushing work, which he's doing. I think, if Bo Nix makes it through that game, there's every chance that he's going to put up enough rushing yards and passing yards to be QB12.
Yeah, absolutely. My ranks have currently crashed. So I've got him QB16. There you go, QB16. I'm a little bit concerned just because I don't really like the offense, and I don't think Bo Nix is a fantastic quarterback or playing great ball. But if you want access to myself and Tom, if you want 24-hour access to ask me, Tom, Tyler, all the questions you desire, you can dive in our Discord. You get rankings, tools, and everything you could ever need to crush every single format of fantasy, whether that's Dynasty, DFS, Redraft, or Best Ball. All you got to do is click that little join button below. There's 3 different tiers. You can come and join the family. We guarantee you will not regret it. Moving on, though, Tom, to the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the Eagles are big 7.5-point favorites. Does that mean you're any interest in the Jacksonville passing game, or what is left of the Jacksonville passing game?
Yeah, it would be a lot easier if we had clarity on Brian Thomas. If it wasn't just Christian Kirk who was missing. But I think the fact that this is happening when Evan Ingram's back out there, it at least helps Trevor Lawrence a little bit. Like, Trevor Lawrence has been good. Over the last 4 games, he ranks 5th in EPA, 71% completion rate. He's also been one of the best deep ball passers in the league this year, and he is taking a lot of shots downfield. It's helped by the fact he's got Brian Thomas down there. But yeah, I'm completely fine with starting Trevor Lawrence. I think that he can be fine. I think that if Travis Etienne misses out, then you start Tank Bigsby, who had a season high 43% route participation last week. The Eagles, they do allow the 5th fewest running back fantasy points, but sometimes volume's just enough to get there, and you can be fine with that. In terms of wide receiver position, the Eagles allow the 10th most wide receiver points, so Brian Thomas, if he can play, is a smash. Tight end is where I struggle, though, because the Eagles have allowed the 2nd fewest tight end fantasy points. Evan Ingram's been tight end 12 and tight end 19 in his last 2 games. I just think Evan Ingram needs so much volume to be able to get there that I always struggle with him. I know you're higher on him than I am, but on the Eagles side, it's been noteworthy that since the bye week and since AJ Brown came back, but things have started to flip a little bit. AJ Brown's seen this monster target share. Saquon's been below 10% target share in 2 of the last 3. Jalen Hurts has also rushed for more touchdowns since the bye week, which has resulted in Saquon having less. So Saquon's kind of he's keeping his fantasy value alive, but I'd be a little bit wary of it at the minute. And also, this Jags team, they're a pass funnel. They rank 11th best against the run in DVOA, but they rank dead last 32nd against the pass. So I think this one sets up to be another fantastic AJ Brown week. Devonta Smith missed practice today for a personal reason, but should be out there. I'd play him. Grant Calcaterra had now 83% route participation in the last 3 games. That's a really high number for a tight end, and I'd be fine starting him in DFS formats.
Yeah, I mean, you said this week's an AJ Brown week. Let's be honest, every week's an AJ Brown week. The guy's an absolute stud. You mentioned, Tom, all these terrible stats for the Eagles. They're really good against tight ends. It makes you concerned about Evan Ingram. Well, I've got news for you. I don't think Evan Ingram's going to play tight end this week. We saw it last week. Once all the wide receivers got injured, we saw Evan Ingram moved around the formation. They brought Brenton Strange in. He played the traditional tight end positions. I'm wheels up for Evan Ingram this week. He's my start of the week. He's a top 5 option for me at the position. I just think that the amount of injuries they've got in the wide receiver core, Gabe Davis looks like he's potentially not going to play. Brian Thomas, who knows? Christian Kirk's out. I just think that Evan Ingram, we know that Trevor Lawrence loves him. We know that he's his little safety blanket. He's going to target him heavily. I think that Evan Ingram could have a huge week in terms of volume. And we saw it last week. I think he's going to get more snaps and more routes out of the slot and out wide than he would do in line, and that's where I think that this Philadelphia Eagles defense can be got at. Tank Bigsby, any interest? Travis Etienne potentially back this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's fine. I don't think it's a great matchup, but I think the team trusts him enough to be out there. Dearness Johnson will mix in a little bit, but not to the point where it's particularly fantasy relevant. So yeah, I'm fine with it, but I'm not excited about it. And if you've got a better option, I'd probably look there.
Yeah, and we're talking about skill position players, Tom, but it doesn't mean we can't talk defense. John's asking in the chat, streaming a defense. He wants to know, would you prefer the Bills, Washington, or again the Bills?
I think, sorry, I think this one would be, well, it's very tight for me in my rankings. I've got the Bills at defense 8 and then the Commanders at 9. And I think, yeah, possibly just the Bills, but I don't have much there. Yeah.
It's a smash Bills for me. I've got the Bills as a top 5 option. I would say I'm really high on the Titans this week. It's particularly if Jacoby Brissett's under center. They're number 1 defense. So go and have a sniff around, see if Titans are available. I think they could smash. But out of those 2 options you've given us, it's absolutely the Bills.
Chargers. Oh, okay. Chargers instead of the second Bills.
Oh, okay. Would you go Chargers over Bills? I'm still Bills.
I'd go Chargers. Yeah, I've got Chargers as my 5th ranked defense against Jameis Winston. Yes, the Ravens dropped 3 interceptions against him. I think that, slightly more competent secondary play would catch at least a couple of those.
Yeah, Jameis is always going to give a defense a chance, isn't he? Let's be honest. Chicago versus the Cardinals up next. Kyler Murray has played some phenomenal ball, some awful ball. What do we get this week?
Well, that's the real question, because for the last couple of weeks, I've really struggled ranking him. I've put him like fringe QB1 territory. And then, of course, he has back-to-back top 12 QB finishes in a row for the first time this year. What we've seen from him, particularly when he's broken some of those really long runs, he's looked explosive. He's looked really good in the running game, and he needs to keep sustaining that. Kyler's now had 20 plus points in 3 of the last 4, so we should be able to trust him a little more. The way to get at Chicago, though, it's not through the pass. They are an excellent pass defense. They rank second in DVOA, 19th against the run. So I'm earmarking this for a big James Conner game, who James Conner had 90% running back opportunity share in 3 of the last 4 games. The only one he didn't have that level was when he got slightly banged up. The team put Trey Benson in. Trey Benson did fine, but they still go straight back to James Conner. This is James Conner's backfield. The Cardinals are joint first in explosive run rate with the Ravens. Obviously, Derrick Henry gets all the flashy ones, but James Conner just grinds them out, like gets 15 yards, gets 16 yards, 17 yards, not breaking 84-yard kind of runs. And then Kyler's broken a couple of big runs, which really contributed to that. So I would like to see the Cardinals really try to attack the Bears on the ground in this one, which doesn't spell great news for Marvin Harrison Jr., but I just don't know what to do with him anyway. I would like to see Trey McBride get some more touchdowns, but I've been saying that for well over a year now. And then the way the Bears can attack the Cardinals, it's through the air. We flip the script here. The Cardinals rank 15th against the run, 29th against the pass. Caleb Williams has become more and more comfortable in this one. I think DeAndre Swift can have a fine game because, look, 15th against the run isn't like incredible. But it would be nice to see Rome Odunze come out and have another strong week after leading the Bears in week 8 with target share, air yard share, and first read share. So it would be great for Odunze to start paying off, because I think people are going to hit a point soon with buys where they're going to have to drop him if not. Otherwise, I think it's pretty straightforward who you'd want to start and sit in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, the Cardinals being good against the run. Let's be honest, DeAndre Swift did most of his damage in the passing game and in space. So I'm not sure that necessarily marries up with a team that's strong against the run, going to stop him. I really like Marvin Harrison this week. I think he should, again, last week, the usage changed. We saw some more crossing routes, more continuation routes, rather than getting to stop and have to turn around that sort of big frame. Hopefully that wasn't just a 1 week thing, and we're going to see that as a trend moving forward, and we can actually see him moving forward do some damage. Cole Kmet, Tom, when he scores in bunches. Is it a Cole Kmet week this week, or do you think you got to get away from him? Is he a top 12 option?
I mean, Cole Kmet sometimes ends up getting ranked as a top 12 option, not through choice, but through lack of better options at the position. The Cardinals are completely middle of the pack against tight end position. They rank 16th for fantasy points allowed to the position. In DVOA, they rank 7th best against defending the position. They've given up some fantasy production, but it's not been consistent. And I just feel like, if you've got to start Cole Kmet, you've got to start Cole Kmet, but I don't really want to start him in any DFS lineup. But if you did, it would probably be good leverage away from a more chalky Trey McBride in that game.
Yeah, absolutely. He's 15 for me this week. So yeah, not a nailed on starter, but hold your nose and start him if you're in a pinch. Detroit versus Green Bay. This feels like this could be an absolute barn burner, points everywhere, which probably means it's going to be a 20-point squib, right?
Probably, yeah. I mean, the big concern for me is that the way to get at the Lions is through the passing game. They give up the 3rd most wide receiver fantasy points through the passing game. And I just worry that this Green Bay team, they sometimes skew towards the run quite heavily. We know that we've got Jordan Love out there playing banged up potentially again. If not, then you've got Malik Willis, who will be very run heavy. So are we going to see any of that? We've got Jaden Reed, who's had above a 20% target share once in the last 5 games. I'm finding it really difficult to rank him at the minute. And I'm finding it really difficult to predict which Packers wide receiver is going to go off in a given week. I'm kind of okay starting Reed, Dubs, Watson at a push. Dontavian Wicks might pop up, but I don't think you can ever have confidence in when to start him. Josh Jacobs has got a really difficult matchup against this Lions team, though. Like, they've allowed the third fewest running back fantasy points. Kenneth Walker's pretty much the only running back who's had a good game against them. But then on the Lions side, with no Jameson Williams, I think Sam Laporta has had the most relevancy he's had all season, a 33% target share. And then you've got Amon-Ra, who we know is just going to feast every week. I traded him to you in a Dynasty League today, and it really hurt me to trade away one of my few Amon-Ra shares. But look, I mean, the Lions can get there in pretty much any way they want to. So, yeah, I think you probably know who you want to start in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's start all the obvious options. For me, I can't get on board with Christian Watson unless it's like wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5. I don't think Dontavian Wicks is going to be anywhere near a starting lineup anywhere soon. You know, yes, he had some fantastic underlying numbers in terms of yards per route run, targets per route run, stuff like that. He's still flashing in those numbers, but the snap share started to disappear. Him and Christian Watson have pretty much been splitting snaps all year. But every week, the last 3 weeks, he has gone Christian Watson's way more and more and more. And Dontavian Wicks is potentially borderline droppable in some of those 12-team normal redraft leagues. Moving on to the next game, though, Tom. But before we get there, you're an hour in. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, go and do it now. Come and join the family. You will enjoy the content. I guarantee it. Rams at Seattle. Some of these later games are looking very, very juicy in terms of over-unders. 48.5 points. Tom, the Rams offense, when they have had Matthew Stafford, Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua, and Cooper Kupp, have been a top 5 offense. That's not this year. That is all time. Since EPA per play was first started to be tracked, they are top 5 all time in EPA per play. Do you think this Rams offense that is finally getting healthy, the offensive line is getting healthy, are we going to see them destroy this Mike McDaniel-led defense?
I don't know. I don't know about that, because the thing with the Seattle Seahawks is that they've been really pass heavy. They rank 3rd in pass rate over expectation over the last 4 games. They've leaned pass heavy pretty much the entire season. And obviously missing DK Metcalf is a big hit. Losing Noah Fant is a noteworthy hit because he's had over 65 yards in several games this year. Well, 2 or 3. And JSN just completely looks mid. And it hurts me because we were quite high on him last year. I expected him to kick on this year. And none of his numbers have really improved. He's fine. I think he's good. And when you're playing alongside DK Metcalf, that's kind of enough. But I was just hoping for a bit more. Last week, he had, 6 for 67. Nothing overly impressive without DK Metcalf. I think the Bills' pass defense is probably a tougher one than the Rams. I mean, the Rams' defense, they allow the 19th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position, but they do rank 27th in DVOA. They also rank 27th against the run, though. So if I had more confidence in the passing game or the running game, it is going to be Kenneth Walker, who's looked absolutely fantastic this year and is an easy player to rank in the top 5 running backs at times when you've got players on bye weeks. On the Rams side, Puka Nacua, if he plays, you've got to start him. I mean, he had barely any practice last week, comes out, and then he's targeted on 41% of his routes. It does have this knee issue, but yeah, you've got to do it. Kyron, absolute confidence in him because the Seahawks have been poor against running backs all year. They rank 7th in fantasy points allowed. Their run defense does rank 21st compared to their pass defense, which ranks 14th in DVOA. And I just think this can be a really fun one. There's probably no need to start Colby Parkinson. There's probably no need to go deeper than Tyler Lockett on the Seahawks side. But from a DFS perspective, I'd be attacking both sides of it with pretty good confidence levels.
Yeah, I'm less confident in Tyler Lockett. I think maybe now DK Metcalf's not active, maybe we can kind of get him in, but I wouldn't be looking at him outside sort of wide receiver 3-4 territory. I'm really concerned about JSN. I talked about it in my buy sales video earlier in the week. I don't want to touch him. I think you could be selling on name value right now because describing him as mid is pretty much perfect, Tom. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. He's just done nothing but disappoint. So, yeah, I'm really excited about this game. It's certainly one I'm going to have on one of my screens when I'm watching on Sunday. I think this could be an absolute smash spot for fantasy. The Colts versus the Vikings. Obviously, we now see the Anthony Richardson era potentially come to an end. We've got two former Jets quarterbacks in this matchup, Tom. Which one's going to come out triumphant?
So, yeah, it's kind of interesting because Sam Darnold has looked a little bit iffy the last couple of weeks, basically since that game against the Jets in London. He's only played 2 games, but he hasn't looked as hot as he did over the opening part of the season. But the Colts defense is pretty damn poor. I'm not expecting them to be able to do too much. And the Vikings defense, they allow the most wide receiver fantasy points. So it should be a fruitful one on both sides of the ball. We know that when Joe Flacco is in, that it's going to be so much better for guys like Josh Downs. It's going to be so much better for Michael Pittman. I mean, Indy led the league in catchable targets per game when Joe Flacco was at QB. When Anthony Richardson was out there, they were bottom of the league in catchable targets per game. And Anthony Richardson, I put this tweet out there early this week, but Anthony Richardson was playing at a similar level, if not worse, to Tim Tebow in 2011 when he kind of ran out of ground, because you can't go out there and complete less than 10 completions per game. 44% completion rate is truly diabolical. And whilst I disagree with the decision to bench Anthony Richardson, I completely get it at the same time. I mean, Joe Flacco's biggest problem is getting the ball out quickly against this blitz-happy Minnesota defense, because we know they're going to blitz a lot. And Joe Flacco, when he's got the ball out in under 2 seconds against the blitz, he's been excellent. But over the last couple of years, when he's held on to it more than 2 seconds, he's been atrocious. He hasn't been incredible this season as it was. I mean, like, the Joe Flacco era in Cleveland was kind of masked because it was fun. But this year, he ranks 27th in yards per attempt. He's 4th highest off target throw rate. So he's not anything special. It pains me to say that. But from a fantasy point of view, Aaron Jones had a really strong week 8. He had 100% of running back rush shares. Justin Jefferson should smash in this. Josh Downs should smash in this. I think Jonathan Taylor looks kind of healthy enough now that we should have some faith in him. But I don't want to get too deep into the passing options on either side. It's going to be very interesting to see how much TJ Hawkinson plays. I wouldn't be able to start him with any confidence level this week. But according to reporters around the Vikings, they say that he's healthy and ready to go.
In the best shape of his life, Tom.
Of course.
I'm fascinated to see what the Vikings defense do. We saw the Rams on Thursday night last week potentially solve the Vikings defense in terms of huge amounts of those crossing routes and causing real havoc for the Vikings with their blitz heavy scheme. Last year, the Vikings had a similar thing where they started out really hot and then teams started to work them out and they kind of drifted away. If that happens, I'm fascinated to see. They've had 10 days to prepare for this game. Are we going to see a huge amount of Josh Downs, Adonai Mitchell, crossing routes, drags across the field, get the ball in their hands and let them work? Or are the Vikings going to have a counter for that? Because that's kind of where it goes. And on the other side of the field, Christian Darrisaw out injured, out for the season. They obviously traded for Cam Robinson, who is bad, let's be honest. So I'm now fascinated to see this Vikings offense that has been fantastic. Sam Darnold has played so much better than you could ever imagine when he's been kept clean and not been pressured, and has been the Sam Darnold we kind of know and love when he's felt under pressure. Now they've lost their all-pro left tackle. They bring in a below-average left tackle. Does that mean Sam Darnold's going to be under pressure more? Does that mean that we're going to try and get the ball out more? I'm fascinated to see what's happening with this Vikings offense. I do think it's a case of start as many options as you can in this game, though. I'm very excited about pretty much anyone. TJ Hawkinson, Tom, where do you have him this week? Because I have no idea where to rank him. I've got him in as my tight end 12, I think, at the moment. But you could tell me he finishes and sees good volume. You could tell me that he doesn't see a target. I have no idea.
So I've got him ranked as my tight end 16 at the minute. I've got him behind Zach Ertz and Hunter Henry, ahead of Jonnu Smith and Dalton Schultz, who obviously played last night.
Yeah, it's kind of similar sort of range, I think.
Yeah, and I'm kind of willing to lose on TJ Hawkinson in his first week back. Like, I just always think playing players coming off injury is always something that's a bit tricky. Playing players coming off a super serious injury when you've moved on to a different quarterback, there's a lot of unknown there, and I'm willing to just wait it out a week.
Absolutely. And it's a position where if you're in a 12-team league, most teams have got 14, 15 tight ends are rostered. You can go and find someone that's got a chance at a touchdown and take a shot there.
Yeah.
Moving on to Monday Night Football, Tampa Bay versus Kansas City. Now, the Chiefs' defense has been absolutely phenomenal this year. The Bucks' offense is struggling with injuries. Is there anyone on that side of the ball you feel confident starting this week?
K Dotton, I think you can start K Dotton with confidence, like what he's coming off. Team first read target share of 30% in week 8. The week before, he had 8 for 100 against the Ravens. So he's going to be an integral part of this team until they get Mike Evans back. Jalen McMillan was second in first read target share last week with 21%. Which was quite encouraging. We didn't see him move into the slot role that we thought we might. He had a 30% slot rate compared with Sterling Shepard, who had a 60% rate. It seems like the team isn't particularly high on Sterling Shepard. I think he's just kind of there because he's Baker Mayfield's college mate and because we don't really have any options. But some of the coaching staff comments just make you think, if everyone was healthy, I think that Sterling Shepard would be long gone. Sean Tucker only played 7 snaps in week 8. The coach and staff, Todd Bowles, talked about how the game just got away from them, but they need to re-emphasize getting him involved this week, which if that happens, it's bad news for Bucky Irving and it's bad news for Rachaad White because we can deal with the two-player committee. I don't think that you're necessarily going to have much joy against the Chiefs running the ball anyway, because they rank dead last in fantasy points allowed to the position. Their run defense ranks second in DVOA. This year, they're actually worse against the pass. Last year, it was the other way around. But they rank 8th against the pass. So it's not like Baker Mayfield can just go out there and get by on sheer volume spraying the ball around. So yeah, it's much less intriguing than it could have been. On the Chiefs side, we've seen Travis Kelce ever since Rashee Rice got hurt. He's averaging 15.7 points per game. He's had a really high target share in those. Xavier Worthy, minus 134 receiving yards over expected. That's the second fewest in the league. He has seen his 2 highest target shares of the season in the last 2 games. But I don't feel great about Xavier Worthy. I don't feel great about wanting to start him at any point. I think DeAndre Hopkins, we saw Andy Reid come out and say, DeAndre Hopkins is going to play the Rashee Rice role for us. Well, he didn't do that. What he did do was draw enough coverage away from Travis Kelce that it made Travis Kelce's life easier. So I'd be fine starting DeAndre Hopkins with another week in the system and the extra day to the Monday Night Football before he's playing. Travis Kelce has got rid of all those concerns that we had about him. I'm still just struggling with Kareem Hunt. Like, the Chiefs have the lowest explosive run rate in the league at 16%. Kareem Hunt's had 0 explosive runs so far. But I think that's just one where I'm kind of slow to get over my preseason feelings about Kareem Hunt because the volume is really strong.
No, I don't think you are. I think Kareem Hunt's average. Kareem Hunt's doing nothing. He's not adding a huge amount of value. But for this Chiefs offense, that's what they want right now. They just want someone that can keep them on track, on tempo, and kind of move the ball. And he is purely a volume-based RB2. He's not adding much to the game. He's not getting you anything explosive. He's not getting you, obscene volumes in the receiving game. But actually, week in, week out, that's enough to get you a top 24 week. And yeah, it feels pretty disgusting, but you just kind of get there. Before we close out, though, if you've got any more questions, remember, after we're live, you can still get them in the comments. And Tom and I will ask them all the way up. We've got a question from Jace Mills. Should I trade Metcalf and Brooks for Connors? And I guess that's Mooney. I feel I need another starting running back and have no wide receiver depth.
No, I wouldn't do this one. I mean, I think there's other ways that you can trade to acquire some running back depth for some. I mean, I would guess that this would probably be Dynasty, would it? Because I wouldn't be trading for Brooks in any format right now. Well, in any redraft format. But I think that there's other trades that you can make with Metcalf involved if you're looking to trade Metcalf away.
I think whatever format this is, if this is Dynasty, I want DK Metcalf and Brooks by an absolute mile. If this is redraft, I still want DK Metcalf and Brooks. I think that, as you said, you can get by with kind of volume-based production at the position for a couple of weeks, and hopefully Brooks can kind of get you there. He's adding some more context. He's absolutely loaded at wide receiver. He's got Puka, Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., and Olave. We won't mention Deontay because I think he's probably not rosterable in most formats now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can understand that. Like, I think you can move DK Metcalf in that situation with those wide receivers you've got. But I'd possibly be looking to move Olave instead. And I think that, Olave had a great week last week, and I think he's going to have another good week this week. And if you could do something like Olave for James Conner and something else, then maybe that's what I'd be going with.
Yeah, I think if you're struggling at running back position, you don't want to be trading away Brooks. As much as we're saying Brooks might not be useful this year, there is a chance that he could still be a useful fantasy back, explosive in the fantasy playoffs. So I'd be looking to keep Brooks, move one of those receivers. I love the call of selling Olave after a big week this week and go out and buy a running back. You don't need to worry about adding in Brooks or adding in Mooney. But that is it, Tom. That wraps up the Week 9 preview. Remember, if you are UK-based, jump across to the Fantasy Game Day Fantasy Sanctuary channel. We will be live in just a few minutes talking through our favourite picks there. If not, Tom will have a DFS video. And of course, Tyler will be back on Sunday with those last-minute start-sit decisions to help you fine-tune those lineups and bring home those titles. We will see you again very soon.